Welcome to Washington Today for Monday, January 13th, 2024. I'm Gary Sterkoff. Thank you for joining us. In his final foreign policy speech today, President Biden said the U.S. is winning the worldwide competition. Speaking at the State Department, the president reflected on his administration's accomplishments around the world. He talked about the Afghanistan withdrawal, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and said his administration continues to work urgently to reach a ceasefire and hostage deal between Israel and Hamas terrorists. We'll hear from the president's speech coming up. The Pentagon said today U.S. military aircraft dropped more than 16,000 gallons of fire suppressant on the Los Angeles wildfires over the weekend. They've also more than doubled the number of National Guard troops available to assist in response efforts. Meanwhile, firefighters say the return of dangerous wind and weather conditions predicted for this week could hamper their efforts. Already, at least 24 people have died as a result of the fires, with dozens still missing. California Governor Gavin Newsom said he expects the death toll to rise. The first confirmation hearings for the Trump cabinet kick off this week. 12 of the president-elect's nominees are scheduled to sit in front of senators. And starting it all off tomorrow, Defense Secretary nominee and former Fox News host Pete Hegseth. Allegations of sexual misconduct, excessive drinking, and poor organizational management have followed Pete Hegseth since Donald Trump nominated him. Punchbowl News senior congressional reporter Andrew Desidero will tell us what to watch for this week. We begin at the State Department and President Biden.
I come here to the State Department to report on to the American people on the progress we've made in the last 4 years in our foreign policy and our presidency. I've said many times, we're at an inflection point. The post-Cold War period is over. A new era has begun. In these 4 years, we faced crises that we've been tested. We've come through those tests stronger, in my view, than we entered those tests. This is a fierce competition underway. The future of the global economy, technology, human values, and so much else. Right now, in my view, thanks to our administration, the United States is winning the worldwide competition. Compared to 4 years ago, America is stronger. Our alliances are stronger. Our adversaries and competitors are weaker. We have not gone to war to make these things happen. During my presidency, I've increased America's power at every dimension. We've increased our diplomatic power, creating more allies than the United States has ever had in the history of our nation. We've increased our military power, making the most significant investments in the defense industrial base in decades. We've increased the technology power, taking the lead in artificial intelligence and other technologies of the future. And we've increased the economic power, building the most dynamic economy in the world from the bottom up and the middle out, not the top down. In short, Kamala and I took office, our nation had become stronger at home, are stronger in the world. And now, America is more capable and, I would argue, better prepared than we've been in a long, long time. While our competitors and adversaries are facing stiff headwinds, we have the wind at our back because of all of you.
And responding to the speech, House Republican Conference Chair Lisa McClain posted on X, quote, "America is weaker, not stronger because of Joe Biden. America is mocked, not feared. In 7 days, President Trump will reverse Biden's destruction and make America respected again." Here's more from President Biden.
Today, I can also report to the American people, we're the first president in decades who's not leaving a war in Afghanistan to his successor. But we've got bin Laden during the Obama-Biden administration, the primary objective of war had been accomplished. And I believe that going forward, the primary threat of al-Qaeda would no longer be emanating from Afghanistan, but from elsewhere. And so, we not need to station a sizable number of American forces in Afghanistan. So when I took office, I had a choice. Ultimately, I saw no reason to keep thousands of servicemen in Afghanistan. I think I have my schedule with me, and I keep on my, I don't here, I don't have, but I keep on the back of my card the actual number of dead and wounded that occurred in our longest war to remind myself. Keep spending hundreds of millions of dollars a day. We're no longer doing that. In my view, it was time to end the war and bring our troops home, and we did. commend the courage of all those who served in Afghanistan. We grieve all 2,461 Americans who made the ultimate sacrifice in the longest war in American history. And I grieve those brave service members whose lives were lost during the withdrawal. We also thank those inside and outside of government who have done so much to help thousands of Afghan families resettle in the United States. Remember, critics said if we entered the war, it would damage our alliances and would create threats to our homeland from foreign-directed terrorism out of a safe haven in Afghanistan. Neither has occurred. Neither has occurred. And our alliances have stayed strong. We've used our over-the-horizon capabilities to strike in Afghanistan and elsewhere when we had to. For instance, eliminating Zawahiri, the leader of al-Qaeda, who helped orchestrate the September 11th attacks. And we did it without putting more American boots on the ground. And by ending the war, we've been able to focus our energy and resources on more urgent challenges. There is nothing, I can tell you from my conversations with both Xi and Putin, nothing our adversaries and competitors like Russia and China would have liked more than seeing us to continue to be tied down in Afghanistan for another decade. For all those reasons, ending the war was the right thing to do, and I believe history will reflect that.
And Republicans on the House Foreign Affairs Committee posting on X following the speech, quote, Joe Biden is trying to gaslight America into believing his foreign policy legacy isn't a failure, especially when it comes to Afghanistan. The reality is that Joe Biden's disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan cost 13 American service members their lives. And Texas Republican Wesley Hunt also posted saying, quote, the right thing to do, according to Joe Biden, leave billions of dollars of weapons for terrorist groups, waste 20 years of military efforts, risk thousands of lives, lost 13 U.S. soldiers. Biden takes one last victory lap for his failures. The president also talked about Ukraine's battle with Russia.
Today, I can report to the American people, our adversaries are weaker than were when we came into this job 4 years ago. Just consider Russia. When Putin invaded Ukraine, he thought he'd conquer Kyiv in a matter of days. But the truth is, since that war began, I'm the only one that stood in the center of Kyiv, not him. Putin never has. Think about it. It was a long train ride, but I'm the only commander-in-chief to visit a war zone not controlled by U.S. forces. We helped Ukrainians stop Putin. And now, nearly three years later, Putin has failed to achieve any of his strategic objectives. He has failed thus far to subjugate Ukraine, failed to break the unity of NATO, and failed to make large territorial gains. There's more to do. We can't walk away.
And he also said Israel and Hamas terrorists are close to a ceasefire and hostage deal.
On the war between Israel and Hamas, we're on the brink of a proposal that I laid out in detail months ago, finally coming to fruition. I have learned in many years of public service to never, ever give up. So I spoke to Prime Minister of Israel yesterday. I spoke to Emir of Qatar today. I look forward to speaking with President Sisi soon. We're pressing hard to close this. The deal we have structured would free the hostages, halt the fighting, provide security to Israel, and allow us to significantly surge humanitarian assistance to the Palestinians who've suffered terribly in this war that Hamas started. They've been through hell. So many innocent people have been killed. So many communities have been destroyed. The Palestinian people deserve peace and the right to determine their own futures. Israel deserves peace and real security. And the hostages and their families deserve to be reunited. And so we're working urgently to close this deal.
You can see all of today's speech on the C-SPAN Now mobile app and at cspan.org. The president continues touting his administration's record this week. Tomorrow, he'll deliver remarks commemorating a conservation proclamation. Wednesday, he will give his farewell address from the Oval Office. Thursday, he'll be at the Department of Defense for a farewell ceremony, and on Friday, he'll speak in front of the U.S. Council of Mayors. Now to the federal response on the Los Angeles wildfires. Here's Pentagon spokesperson Major General Pat Ryder.
As part of our ongoing support to California, over 1,800 California National Guardsmen have been activated to assist with the firefighting efforts, including hand crews, rotary wing aircraft, and military police that are working in support of local law enforcement. Additionally, 8 C-130s equipped with the Modular Airborne Firefighting System, or MAFS, are currently on station at Channel Islands Air National Guard Station to support aerial firefighting efforts. Six MAFS missions were flown over the weekend, dropping over 16,000 gallons of fire suppressant, and additional MAFS missions are anticipated for today. Additional assets to include the 10 Navy helicopters with water delivery buckets and 500 active duty Marines from Camp Pendleton are ready to provide support if requested by the lead response agencies. The department remains committed to providing assistance and support to those affected by the wildfires and will continue to work closely with our federal, state, and local partners to respond to this disaster.
According to Newsweek.com, those C-130 aircraft can release nearly 14 tons of water or fire retardant in less than 5 seconds. Here's more Q&A with Major General Ryder and reporters.
Can you clarify so these 10 helicopters and the 500 active duty troops are still on standby? They've not been used at all, right?
Correct.
Is there something else that California is asking for? Are people looking ahead to reconstruction? I mean, it seemed pretty odd that they've been struggling to fight these fires and they haven't used these additional assets.
Yeah, well, I won't speak for the state of California. I mean, as you heard me say, they've increased the number of National Guardsmen that have been activated, upwards of 1,800 now. And of course, as Sabrina highlighted on Friday, we are doing everything we can to lean as far forward as we can to be prepared to support the needs of the lead federal agencies. And so, as I'm sure you can appreciate, there are capabilities that California and FEMA are already employing. So these assets are available to be introduced into that mix should they be needed and when they're needed. But you've got to do this in a choreographed way that synchronizes capabilities instead of introduces problems to an already complex situation on the ground. So again, we're going to continue to closely monitor, and as soon as and if those assets are requested, they'll of course be available. The only other thing I'd say too is that, especially with aircraft, being cognizant of wind conditions, and so that also can be a factor that's taken into account. But again, I won't speak for California or FEMA.
And Politico is reporting today that a group of House Republicans and President-elect Trump are talking about tying California wildfire aid to a federal debt ceiling increase. The Politico story says, quote, of the nearly 24 House Republicans who attended a Sunday dinner at Mar-a-Lago, where this option was discussed, several are caucus leaders and appropriators with major influence in upcoming budget reconciliation and government funding negotiations. According to Politico, House Speaker Mike Johnson was not at the dinner on Sunday, and no final decisions were made. But earlier this afternoon, the Speaker told CNN's Manu Raju that he personally believes conditions should be placed on any federal aid.
I think we've got to have a serious conversation about that. Obviously, there's been water resource mismanagement, forest management mistakes, all sorts of problems. And it does come down to leadership, and it appears to us that state and local leaders were derelict in their duty in many respects. So that's something that has to be factored in. I think there should probably be conditions on that aid. That's my personal view. We'll see what the consensus is. I haven't had a chance to socialize that with any of the members over the weekend because we've all been very busy, but it'll be part of the discussion for sure.
What about the debt limit increase? What about tying the debt limit increase to it?
There's some discussion about that, but we'll see where it goes.
Meanwhile, White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre was asked about the Politico report and how the Biden White House is handling the federal response to the wildfires amid the presidential transition.
Yeah, so look, I'm not going to get into these hypotheticals and potentials of policies and what's going to happen moving forward. We are very much focused on what's happening on the ground, helping local and state officials, and certainly we see what the brave firefighters are doing to trying to contain these wildfires, protecting lives and property, and it has been just amazing to watch this certainly unprecedented event. And so what we're going to do on the federal level, as you've heard this president, we've read out calls that he's done, briefings that he's done. You've seen him in person. Take questions from your colleagues about the federal response here. And what we want to do is ensure that we provide every resource available to firefighters, to first responders. And so we will. Our commitment right now is to continue to support the communities on the ground through different disaster assistant programs and federal government that the federal government could certainly provide. And so that's our focus. Not going to get into what it could look like down the road. What we want to do is make sure that we are dealing with this unprecedented, horrific, catastrophic moment that we're seeing Southern California having to deal with. And we are very appreciative of firefighters, first responders, and obviously the community that we're seeing on the ground is certainly heartwarming.
To Capitol Hill now, and Congress is back to work this week. The House worked on a number of Amtrak and disaster-related measures today. Later in the week, they are expected to take up H.R. 28. That's the Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act of 2025, and H.R. 30, Preventing Violence Against Women by Illegal Aliens Act. Now, over in the Senate, lawmakers will be considering the Laken Riley Act, which came over from the House last week. It would require the Homeland Security Department to detain undocumented immigrants for theft-related crimes. A procedural vote on that bill is set for 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time today. Here's more on that from Majority Leader John Thune.
Mr. President, by now I think a lot of Americans know the story of Laken Riley, a 22-year-old nursing student at Augusta University in Georgia with her whole life ahead of her. Laken was murdered last February while out on a run on the Athens campus of the University of Georgia. Her killer was arrested the next day, and it quickly became clear that he should never have had the opportunity to get near Laken Riley because he should never have been in the country in the first place. Laken's killer had entered the country illegally, been released into the interior, and had subsequently been arrested in New York City and later issued a citation for shoplifting in Georgia a few short months before Laken's murder. After his New York City arrest, he was released before Immigration and Customs Enforcement could issue a detainer, a request that police hold an individual so that he can be taken into immigration custody. And so this individual here in the United States illegally and subsequently involved in 2 crimes was free on the University of Georgia campus last February when Laken Riley went running. Mr. President, it's already a problem that we are releasing huge numbers of individuals here illegally into the interior of the country. It is unthinkable that an individual like Laken's killer would be released back into society. Laken's killer should have been detained long before he had a chance to get near her last February. Mr. President, shortly after Laken was killed, Senator Katie Britt, together with Senator Budd, introduced legislation that would require Immigration and Customs Enforcement to detain individuals charged with theft, burglary, or shoplifting. It's a common sense measure that should be an unquestioned yes for every senator. And I'm very pleased that the Senate is finally taking up this bill after Democrats blocked a vote on it last year. The fact that 33 Democrat senators voted in favor of moving to the bill on Thursday was an encouraging sign that at least some Democrats might be serious about wanting to work with Republicans to address border and immigration security. And I hope that proves to be true. It would be incredibly disappointing if Democrats moved to the bill simply to attempt to load it down with poison pills or unrelated measures. This is not, I emphasize not, a comprehensive immigration bill. It is an attempt to right one wrong: the fact that individuals already here illegally who have been charged with various property crimes are not required to be detained by Immigration and Customs Enforcement. It is an attempt to ensure that no other family will have to suffer the pain suffered by Laken Riley's.
And this week's Senate confirmation hearings were on the mind of Democratic leader Chuck Schumer.
This week, the American people will see for the first time what kind of Trump administration they're going to get in the coming years. One that will fight for working people, or one that will fight for the swamp. Over the next 4 days, over a dozen of the president-elect's nominees will testify in committee and make their case to the country. These hearings, in a very real way, are the opening salvo for holding the Trump administration accountable to the public. So today I want to talk a little bit about how Senate Democrats will approach these hearings to uphold our promise to stand up for America's working and middle class. These hearings will be the very first real opportunity to get the Trump administration on who they will fight for, working people or the special interests. Our approach will be this. We will use these hearings to show the contrast between Donald Trump's agenda of helping the special interests, especially the very wealthy, and the Democrats' agenda to fight for working Americans. Nominees should expect tough, candid, but fair questioning. They should come prepared to be honest about everything: their backgrounds, their experiences, and their commitment to increasing opportunity for all Americans, not just those at the top. They will also be asked tough questions about where they stand on the president-elect's stated policies on things that will hurt the middle class, such as tariffs, tax cuts for the wealthy, and undermining policies that lower drug prices. Now, if the president-elect's nominees demonstrate they are qualified and committed to lowering costs, increasing wages, and strengthening our security, Democrats will take that very seriously. But if the president-elect's nominees are going to push policies that make inflation worse and put more money in the pocket of special interests, or duck those important questions, they will be put on the record about their views for all the American people to see. That is why Democrats have insisted on regular order for the president-elect's nominees. A thorough nominations process ensures the American people know precisely who these nominees are and who they'll fight for. Unfortunately, a troubling pattern emerged last week from some Republican chairs who seemed eager to rush the nomination process without fully getting all the necessary documentation. Getting documents is not trivial busywork. These are financial disclosures, ethics agreements, and FBI background investigations. If these nominees have something to hide, these documents could show it. So it's important we don't rush to hearings without examining the record first. The more Senate Republicans try to rush the process without the proper documentation, the more Americans will ask themselves, what are Republicans and their nominees trying to hide?
Like we said, those confirmation hearings start tomorrow. Here's more from Punchbowl News senior congressional correspondent Andrew Desiderio.
In terms of the nominees that are the most controversial, that are going to have the most difficult time getting confirmed, you've got Pete Hegseth, first thing tomorrow morning before the Senate Armed Services Committee. He, of course, is President Trump's nominee to be Defense Secretary. His nomination, I think, is going to be the most important one to focus on this week. But there are a couple of others who actually don't even have confirmation hearings this week that are on the national security side. So Republicans, we know, want to prioritize the national security nominees, who will not have their confirmation hearings this week, and in fact will be continuing to meet with senators. So there's going to be a lot of action both in those committee rooms and outside of those committee rooms. I would say those other two that don't have hearings this week that are going to be controversial are, of course, Tulsi Gabbard, the nominee for Director of National Intelligence, and Kash Patel, the nominee for FBI Director. In Kash Patel's case, he probably will not get a confirmation hearing until February at the earliest. In the case of Tulsi Gabbard, she could get a confirmation hearing as soon as next week, but the Intelligence Committee has not yet noticed that hearing.
What is the strategy for having 14 hearings in 3 days. Is there a strategy here of doing that with Republicans in control of the Senate, obviously, and Donald Trump coming in and these being his nominees, of course?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is what they try to do every 4 years, especially when a new president comes into office, right? They try to stack these as closely to the inauguration date as they can. Of course, the Senate cannot vote to confirm any of these nominees on the floor until the new president is inaugurated. So the question becomes, who is a candidate for day one confirmation? That would require, obviously, someone who's going to get every Republican senator's vote, and also a substantial number of Democratic votes. And the only one I see who could be a candidate for that right now is Marco Rubio, the president's nominee for Secretary of State. He has his nominee before he has his confirmation hearing, before the Foreign Relations Committee on Wednesday of this week. So he is, I think, the likeliest to get confirmed on Inauguration Day. It would be obviously the afternoon of January 20th. 4 years ago, when President Biden first came into office, the nominee that he had confirmed on Inauguration Day was Avril Haines, the Director of National Intelligence. A couple days later, he had Lloyd Austin, the Defense Secretary, confirmed. And then a few days after that, he had Antony Blinken, the Secretary of State, of course, confirmed. So it is normal to prioritize national security nominees on the floor if you're Senate leadership. In the case of Trump's crop of cabinet nominees, they are some of the more controversial ones, aside from Marco Rubio, of course. So you could very well see a day one confirmation. After that, it'll be up to Senate Democrats in terms of whether they will yield time or not, because under the Senate rules, each nominee, under regular order, if you use the full time, each nominee would take up a few days of floor time.
Out of curiosity, does Marco Rubio get to vote on his own nomination?
He can, as long as he is still a sitting senator by the time the vote happens. He could technically wait to resign until right before he becomes Secretary of State, of course. So that could be interesting. I've tried asking him about this to see what his plans are. He doesn't have any specifics to share yet, but that could very well be fascinating. I will say he does not need his own vote. He's going to get 80, 85 plus votes probably in the Senate.
In general, what senators stick out come confirmation time? Who are the senators that really tend to make a splash during these confirmation hearings?
Yeah, look, during the hearings, obviously it's dependent on who sits on what committees. On the floor, it's a lot different because you have the sort of perpetual swing votes. Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski. I would put Mitch McConnell in that category now that he's not in leadership anymore. Mitch McConnell has a singular focus for the remaining 2 years in his Senate term, which is to continue to advance his national security doctrine, his foreign policy doctrine, how he sees the world, and that involves, of course, pushing back against what he sees as a more isolationist streak popping up in his party. And one of the ways he is thinking about doing that is on these nominations, right? So, you have to really consider, is Mitch McConnell going to vote for someone like Tulsi Gabbard? Is he going to vote for someone like Pete Hegseth? I think a lot of it depends on what they say during their confirmation hearings and how they lay out their case. But I would say just in terms of who to watch on the Senate floor, I think those three, Collins, Murkowski, McConnell. Beyond that, I think it's nominee dependent because some senators, as we know, do have their pet issues they like to focus on when it comes to certain subject matter areas that cabinet nominees could have jurisdiction over. So again, it's nominee dependent, but I would say those three are the ones to focus on.
Punchbowl News senior congressional correspondent Andrew Desiderio on this morning's Washington Journal. You can see the whole segment at cspan.org and on the C-SPAN Now mobile app. And just this note, according to Leo Shane, reporter for the Military Times, the confirmation hearing for VA Secretary nominee Doug Collins that was originally scheduled for this week is being delayed because of problems getting paperwork from the FBI. It was scheduled for tomorrow, now scheduled for January 21st. We'll have live coverage of tomorrow's Senate Armed Services confirmation hearing for Pete Hegseth. That is scheduled to start at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time here on C-SPAN Radio. You can also watch it on C-SPAN 3. Then on Wednesday, Senate Foreign Relations. Here's Secretary of State nominee Marco Rubio. That is scheduled at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. We'll have it for you live here on C-SPAN Radio. You can also watch it on C-SPAN 3. And both of these hearings will be on the C-SPAN Now mobile app and at cspan.org. You're listening to Washington Today.
Witness democracy unfiltered with C-SPAN. Experience history as it unfolds with C-SPAN's live coverage this month as Republicans take control of both chambers of Congress, and a new chapter begins with the swearing in of the 47th President of the United States on Monday, January 20th. Tune in for our live all-day coverage of the presidential inauguration as Donald Trump takes the oath of office, becoming President of the United States. Stay with C-SPAN this month for comprehensive, live, unfiltered coverage of the 119th Congress and the presidential inauguration. C-SPAN. Democracy unfiltered.
Welcome back to Washington Today. We are 7 days away from Donald Trump's second inauguration. And today, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser, along with other city officials, talked to reporters about their inauguration security plan. Here's Secret Service Washington Field Office Special Agent in Charge, Matt McCool.
We've been planning for this event for 12 months, along with our partners. It's an ever-changing threat environment, and so we stay flexible. If we see that, hey, we need to shore this particular checkpoint up, we do that. So what's different? We've learned. This is our 5th NSSE this year in the Washington Field Office. We've done 83 NSSEs. Each one we take a look at, and if there's areas where we need to improve, we do it. But what I can tell you is that we are 100% confident in the plan that we have put in place for this inauguration, that the public and our protectees will be safe.
And can you give a number of people who are going to be put in place in order to law enforcement agents also?
So there'll be approximately 25,000 law enforcement and military personnel on site to secure the event.
As we heard Agent McCool refer to NSSE, that stands for National Special Security Event. That's a Secret Service term for big events like this, like the inauguration. And of course, Monday's inauguration is the third special event to happen at the Capitol just this month. Last Monday, we had the election certification by Congress. That was immediately followed by former President Jimmy Carter's funeral. And here's U.S. Capitol Police Chief Thomas Manger. He talked about what he thinks the biggest threat his agency is preparing for.
The biggest threat, I think, for all of us remains the lone actor. Just in the past week, while President Carter was lying in state, we had 2 lone actors show up at the Capitol. One trying to bring in knives and a machete, another one who was trying to, what I believe, to disrupt the proceedings by setting their car on fire down in the Peace Circle area. U.S. Capitol Police were able to interdict these folks before they had a chance to do any harm. But that threat of the lone actor remains the biggest justification for us being on at this heightened state of alert throughout the next week.
There are a number of demonstrations planned by groups opposing President-elect Trump for the inauguration. Washington, D.C. Police Chief Pamela Smith talked about that.
And so we do have on January 20th approximately about 12 First Amendment activities. One in particular on the 19th is the People's March, which we have an estimate of about, initially the permit said about 50,000 people. I think as of today, we're looking at about maybe 25,000 or less. We will be prepared. We've dealt with this group size before during the last inauguration. I think it was called the Women's March at that time, and now it's the People's March. And we will be prepared. And that's the largest event with respect to numbers of people coming into the city. Again, we don't give numbers, but we will be prepared to address any large groups that come to our city.
And between the People's March and the large crowds of Trump supporters that are going to be coming into the city, are you aware of any counter-protests or potential for tension between these groups of people, and what measures specifically are you taking to ensure that everyone can voice their thoughts safely in a very politically volatile weekend?
Well, as I've stated before, we want people to come and voice their opinion safely. We have our civil disturbance unit. Every team will be activated here across the city. As I stated before, we have approximately 4,000 law enforcement officers who are providing support here in the city. And we also have the opportunity, we have the Council of Government, where we are an association of police chiefs in this region. So if there's any support that we need, we know how to break glass and ask for those resources in a very quick and swift manner.
And Melania Trump is talking about her plans as First Lady. She was on Fox and Friends this morning. She also revealed where she plans to live during her husband's second term.
I will be in the White House, and when I need to be in New York, I will be in New York. When I need to be in Palm Beach, I will be in Palm Beach. But my first priority is, to be a mom, to be a First Lady, to be a wife. And once we are in on January 20, it's you serve the country.
First 100 days, what will that look like for you? What are you looking forward to the most?
I established my team. I have a few positions that I still need to hire. I will not rush into that. I will see when I'm in the White House and what it's needed. I don't want to hire too many people on my team and spending too much taxpayer money. I want to make sure that every position, they are talented, they have merit, they know what they're doing, and as well as they are team player. They don't have their own agenda, so they're serving me, they're serving my office, and they're serving the country.
And will you continue with your platform, Be Best?
I will continue with Be Best, and also I will expand Be Best. I started in the first administration. I didn't have much support from anyone. I invited all of the streaming platforms to the White House. I had the round table, and I didn't have much support from them. And imagine what we could do in those years if they will rally behind me and teach the children and protect them about the social media and their mental health.
Don't forget, we'll have live all-day coverage of the presidential inauguration a week from today here on C-SPAN Radio and across the C-SPAN networks and online at cspan.org and the C-SPAN Now mobile app. That's also where you can find this program as a podcast, and it's also on YouTube. Just search Washington Today. And for more on the short stories that are shaping Washington every day, get our daily email word for word. Just go to cspan.org/connect to subscribe. I'm Gary Sterkoff. Thanks a lot for listening today to Washington Today.